Welcome back to Jobline. You managed to get your foot in the door for the job interview or that first sales call with a prospective client. Now, what should you do to make sure you stay front and center in the mind of the hiring manager or the new client? Now, according to our guest, Peter Ekstrom, president of Deal Builders, a Long Island-based consulting organization, the secret to a great follow-up takes place at the end of the meeting you are following up. Over the last 20 years, Peter has served the demands of over 100 companies from around the world and has personally scheduled more than 2,500 sales meetings with qualified prospects. So who better to ask about this very, very important topic than you, Peter Ekstrom? Actually, Pete, this is a very serious topic because there are a lot of people out there in the job market, say from the IT world or some other world where it isn't necessarily communications or public relations or sales or marketing, that don't really understand persuasion and selling and closing, and all these terms are a little bit new to them. But I believe you can do everything right, and with a poor follow-up, mess up the whole process.
Absolutely. The more of a process that you have and you practice that process and refine it, the better you are able to execute on the follow-up and separate yourself from all of the other job candidates and all of the other salespeople that are vying for the business. So the ability to communicate is everything, according to Lee Iacocca, and I believe it. And the better you are able to communicate your ideas to others, you can persuade them to see your perspective and hopefully give you that job offer or close that sale.
Okay. Now, before we get in, we have some do's and don'ts to go over. Before we do that, what do you think the biggest problem is? Is it that people don't rehearse, they don't practice, they don't have any foresight into what might happen? What do you think that the biggest issue is?
Well, they don't have a process. They don't have a practice effort that they want to execute over the phone and following up. So they don't have a pattern that they can follow to communicate their ideas of follow-up, so they're always at a loss. They're winging it. And whenever you just wing conversation, the first thing that comes to mind, and that's what you say, you run a risk of saying the wrong thing and creating the wrong first impression of yourself. And when that happens, the interview can fall apart, and so can the follow-up call.
Right. Okay, now Pete, I asked you to put together some bullets for us, which you were kind enough to do. And these are the do's. These are the things you want people to do. The first one is send a thank you email without delay.
Absolutely. Show some gratitude and thank the person and appreciate the limited time that they gave you. They could have done something else, but no, they decided to meet with you and interview you or hear out your product, so thank them.
Okay.
Let them know you appreciate their time.
And that also shows you know how to play by the rules.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then number two is schedule a direct follow-up via phone. Exactly what do you mean?
Well, after the interview or after the sales call, you should always know what the next step in the process is. The best way to do that is work into the conversation at the end of the interview or the end of the sales call and ask the interviewer, when would be an appropriate time for me to follow up to find out one way or the other what our status is and what our next step going forward. When you have something on the calendar and a set aside time, you really give the interviewer or the potential customer an indication that you are an organized individual, you have structure, you're confident enough to ask, and that character trait makes you stand out.
But I would think you'd have to be very careful about the way you ask.
That's right.
Because if you make it seem demanding or arrogant or obnoxious, then you're wiping yourself out altogether.
Then we're back to what most people suffer from, is the inability to communicate.
Right.
If you soften your voice and have prepared speech, then it becomes effortless to ask.
Okay, script your dialogue.
Absolutely. Know what you're going to say before you say it.
Okay. All right, and then Google the prospect.
Yeah, either before the interview or the sales call, but what I found was really interesting is that after the sales call or the interview, do a Google, just on the person's name. Amazing what it is that you'll find, and then you could work that into your follow-up because relevance and commonality with another person usually gets their attention and builds rapport.
And a great way to open the door with them.
Sure.
And then 4 topics of interest. Send FYIs, for example.
Sure. Whatever you learn from the Google search, you can incorporate that into an FYI. You'll always want to stick to your potential customer. You want to stick to the interviewer. You want to keep front and center in their mind and have them focused on you, the candidate, or you, the salesperson. So certainly sending FYIs.
If you see like a nice article or something that's relevant, send it over.
Right. Came across an idea, thought it might benefit you in some way, and that's a great way to keep in touch.
And then engage in conversation.
Make conversation. Most importantly, do not be a robot and sound like everybody else. Try to talk about issues or topics that came up in the interview that are mutual interest, and you'll find that you have conversation. And when you do, you're that much closer to a closed sale or a job offer.
Okay, well done. All right, we have some more information coming up about don'ts. Up next, we've gone through the do's of your follow-up call, but the don'ts are just as equally important. What should you do, what should you avoid when you follow up on a job interview when Jobline returns?